Hello, everyone. Welcome and thank you for logging in for today's webinar. My name is TJ Cantwell, and I'm the Executive Director at the NCCCO Foundation. At the NCCCO Foundation, we are working to improve the crane industry for everyone working in the load handling field by enhancing safety through research, education, and workforce development programs. You can learn more about the Foundation programs, safety tools, research reports, and future webinars at ncccofoundation.org. Today, as part of our education webinar series, our topic is Safety State of Mind, the importance of verification and reporting. During our webinar today, our speakers will discuss the requirements, procedures, and tools for the crane industry regarding verification and reporting, and I'll be acting as the moderator. We'll conduct a Q&A session at the end of today's webinar, so if you have any questions during the webinar, please type them into the Q&A box as we go, and we'll address as many as possible during the Q&A session at the end. Please note that today's webinar is being recorded so that we can share it with others. Before we start, I want to provide a brief introduction to our great speakers. First, John Zarian serves as CCO Certifications General Counsel and Senior Director. Prior to joining CCO in 2016 and for 27 years, his private legal practice emphasized intellectual property in complex business litigation matters. John is an experienced trial lawyer, adjunct law professor, and mediator. He has been recognized as one of the top 100 lawyers in the Mountain States region. John received his law degree from the University of Southern California, holds a master's degree in finance from the University of Utah, and recently earned a certificate in dispute resolution from Pepperdine University. Rico Gracia is the senior heavy equipment training specialist at LYB Lyndon-Bissell. Lyndale-Bissell. He has been with Lyndale-Bissell since 2015. Rico is a crane and rigging subject matter expert with extensive industry experience, including industrial and commercial construction, industrial maintenance, turnarounds, and decommissioning. He is a CCO proctor and contract auditor. He has 30 years experience in the crane industry that has expanded throughout the U.S., South America, and the Middle East. Welcome to both of you. On behalf of myself and our audience, I want to say thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. Now, let's get into it. So, John, I'm going to turn it over to you. Let me give you control and you can get going.
Okay, thank you, TJ. I think, yes, is this working?
Uh,
It is working.
yep,
There we
there you
go.
go.
Got it. All right. Nice to be with all of you. I guess I'll just say at the outset, I'll apologize if you see me looking off to my left out my window here. We've got the first real snowstorm of the entire year. Back east and in the Midwest, it's super cold. Out in the West, it's been warm and we've had no snow, and we've literally been praying for it. So it just goes to show that it's just human nature. You kind of want what you don't have at the moment. Soon we'll be praying for the snow to stop, but for today, it's exciting to get our first big snowstorm really of the entire season. So good to be with you. We have put together a presentation. Pleased to be presenting with Rico on safety, and we went kind of around on what we theme it as. Obviously, we wanted to be speaking about a safety culture. We landed on a safety state of mind. That's really what we wanted to talk about, with a couple of very important examples of what where we go when we have that kind of a state of mind, and what helps create the state of mind. There are other slogans we could have done. Stay alert, don't get hurt comes to mind. There's some good ones out there, but we ended up with safety state of mind, and ultimately it's there's some practical reasons. I mean, we reduce risk, of course, for our employers, for our companies, but more importantly, we avoid injury, we save lives. That safety culture is really just so critical, and what you want is to have that kind of a culture permeate your organization. That's where we strive to be. So these are two areas we're going to focus on. We'll just take them in turn. I'll kick it off and then and turn it over to Rico, and then we'll cover the first topic, and then turn to reporting of incidents, our second topic. So with that as a preface, let me see if I can. Yeah, there we go. We'll start the first part. So certification and verification of certifications. This is the question of when is certification required. So crane operators can be trained. They should be trained. They should be certified. They should be evaluated. Those are all things that need to happen. But as far as the certification goes, operators of cranes, and this is obviously what we do at CCO, is certify crane operators. If the crane's used in construction, the operator must be certified, and you see the CFR rule there under those conditions. There are a few exceptions. For example, equipment with a lifting capacity of 2,000 pounds or less, operators and trainings. There are some exceptions, but it is a requirement. It extends to assembly, disassembly, hoisting loads, or traveling with a crane on a construction site. So it can be broader sometimes than people imagine. There are many other load handling personnel on a site, on a work site, and that can include riggers and signal persons. They may not have a certification requirement, but they of course must still be qualified, and that's something I want to spend a little time on, is the distinction between qualification and certification. But they also are related in the sense that your certification can actually serve to demonstrate that you are qualified, and that we call that for years the gold standard. We've often said CCO certification is the gold standard. So, and even in instances, and before we had the current rule, the crane rule, we spoke of having certification be the gold standard for showing that we are qualified. There are some different terminology, terms that you'll hear. I like to give the example of if you saw this, there's the original Spider-Man movie back in 2002. So J. Jonah Jameson, my favorite character from the movie, throws out, and this is just in the confusion of terms category. I love this example. I'm an IP lawyer by background, and he says to his sidekick, run down to the patent office, copyright the name Green Goblin. I want a quarter every time someone says it. And I often cite this example because if you're an IP lawyer, this is hilarious because you don't get a copyright at the patent office and you don't get a copyright for a name, you get a trademark. So this is the funniest thing ever, right? But no one gets that joke, really. You sit there and it just sounds like it's all right. But if you listen closely, sometimes you'll hear people talk about getting a license when they mean a certification, or having a certification when they got was a certificate. So sometimes we mix up terms, and in our field, this is something that you see. So to clarify, just to distinguish, certification is basically an assessment. You need a test of some kind, some assessment to that you pass, and it's standardized. There's psychometrics. There's things that go into it. That's a certification. If you got a piece of paper at the end of a class, that's a certificate. That's different. There was, maybe an assessment or a test of some sort, but it's not a standardized assessment. It's not a certification. It's just a certificate. A degree, we kind of know that's, some course of study with requirements, but license is often confused with certification. We see that people asking about their license when they mean a certification. Now, that generally means it focuses on a government entity issuing the license. And a final distinction would be qualification. And here's one definition: possessing necessary skills, knowledge, experience, training, credentials to perform a specific task or role safely and effectively. And it's in some ways a more general topic or a concept than certification, but certainly not the same thing. It just means, are you qualified? Certification is one way to demonstrate that you are. So as we look at certification versus other credentials and this distinction specifically between certification and qualification, we see that, again, operators not working construction and others on the site in construction, they must still be qualified. And we talked about the definition of that. So that's important. But what we see, again, is qualifications being issued sometimes by training providers or by others, even employers, and they're not the same thing. They can sometimes look and feel a little bit like a certification, but we'll see the absence of an assessment. Is there a renewal period? Obviously certifications are issued for a period of time. Is it standardized? And maybe really importantly, is it portable? One of the things that certification provides is portability, between jurisdictions, between employers. That's one of the big values of having a standardized assessment type certification. Because certification is important, anytime something is important, people try to knock it off. And so, we've issued cards for many years, and one of the things that we've seen over the years is some forged or fraudulent cards. I mean, they're famous forgers that over history, people that forged Picassos and Rembrandts. That's not these cards. Some of these cards, at a glance, maybe they pass the smell test, but when you look closely, the dates are in the incorrect format. The numbers are off. Even the abbreviations for the designations are incorrect. The logos can be off. The signatures don't match the time period. it goes, we can see these at a glance because we see a fair number of them, and I'll get into that. But we do get these. And so the problem with fraudulent cards, people will sometimes do it digitally. They'll try to create an electronic version, or they'll literally print one. Sometimes it's on paper, it can be laminated. And some of the cards can actually be pretty good. You can see there's a range here. Some are very bad, they're the wrong color, everything about them is off, but some get to be pretty good. In fact, one of the things we found is that there is even businesses that have tried to capitalize on the demand for fraudulent cards, people that haven't put the time in. And they'll just tell you, they'll say, hey, are you too busy? Or do you keep failing your exams? You're not up to standards. We got a solution here. And what they'll do is sell you a fraudulent card. And now we shut this one down. This one was found on Facebook. But you can see they had, they literally were using our logo. They're trying to promote this as something they could provide for a fee. And we reported this one to the FBI. We actually got it shut down through Facebook. So these will pop up from time to time. But there's where there's a demand, there's someone who's going to try to supply it, and we do find that as well. That's how far the scam can go sometimes. And so as a consequence, we do catch. This is reported cases where we've there may be more out there, of course, than we've had reported, but we've had probably we're up to about 4 or 5 a quarter, maybe 1 or 2 a month that we get on average. It does fluctuate, but you see over time the trend, especially as the requirement for certification has become more enforced and in place. We see that this has actually grown over time in the last 4 or 5 years. And so these are the numbers. The last quarter we had 6 of them that reported to us that we followed up on. So the counterfeit cards continue to happen. We continue to see them, and so we have to come up with solutions. We've come up with 2 over the years. I'll talk about a third now in a minute. But one was, and this has been around for a while, the idea of VCO. And so verifycco.org is a place where you can go and the employer can go and verify whoever is interested exactly what credentials that individual holds. You see the timestamp here, so that they know exactly, and that's in real time when you check the website. But you'll be able to see what the credentials are that are held, the issue date, the expiration date. Those are all provided. The card now has a QR code, and so that's much tougher to replicate. We're phasing these in. I think we're near the end of the 5-year phase-in, but these are all being phased in. So eventually, before long, everybody should have a QR code, and if you don't see one, then that's not a good card. If you see one, then you can actually use it and go and find exactly what the credentials in real time that individual has. So those have been good solutions. They've been effective, and yet people are creative. The criminal mind can be pretty sharp and creative. And so here's one. I thought this was particularly creative. This was, I think it's been a year or 2 now ago, but the individual, I guess, hadn't cleared the employer's checking process when they went to look at VCO. And so they forged an email from someone who supposedly worked at CCO that said, yes, sorry, it's our bad. And they actually forged a screenshot to attach to the email that they then sent to themselves. And ostensibly, they sent it to themselves and then produced a printed copy of that to the employer, saying, look, CCO messed up. I'm really, and here's the screenshot. And they apologized. They told me that I'm actually now certified. And so this was reported to us. It was ultimately caught, but it goes to show the creativity of folks that are looking to take a shortcut and not do the work, and the lengths to which we sometimes have to go to just make sure and ensure that folks are in fact certified when they're representing that they are. So we haven't yet seen the forged QR code. Maybe that's coming. And so, but they do get increasingly sophisticated and creative in terms of the forgeries. So what happens, when these things are caught, when someone, how are they even reported to us? What typically happens, these always come to us from employers. And so they can't find the candidate on VCO when they check. And so they'll call customer service at CCO. So they'll verify the search results, say, yep, we see the same thing. Would you please send us a copy or scan a copy and send it to us of that card? And we then refer that matter to the program integrity team, which investigates. We'll talk to the purported cardholder, certificant, and then the employer and others. and then those are generally referred to the Ethics and Discipline Committee, and they will often issue a revocation or a preclusion from testing for that individual. So those cases come to us from the employers. Now, the PIT case is a program integrity team has this great acronym PIT. We love our acronyms, but there was one case here, and I'll just highlight the need for the ongoing verification of these certifications. There was one involving a kind of well-known incident where we had to invalidate a lot of and revalidate a lot of certifications. But someone was revoked, this certificate was revoked, didn't return the card, went to use it, and did so successfully and got on a job site, and shortly thereafter actually caused a fatality on that site. This resulted in bad things, needless to say. I mean, not just a fatality, which is horrible, but after that, an investigation by OSHA, grand jury, litigation, and we last year, a year and a half ago, found out that this same individual still had the card and was still trying to use it to represent himself as being certified. So this just highlights the need for ongoing verification by employers, and not just at the time. I mean, in this case, a key issue in that litigation where that fatality occurred was that that person, they claim had been verified before December by someone else. They relied on it. And of course, the expiration date would have gone, maybe they had a copy on file. The expiration date may have been in 2024, 2025, but they didn't check it again at the time that they brought him onto that job. And so the question in that case, the key question in that litigation was, how often do you have to check it? Every day, every morning? What do you do? And so that's a practical problem for employers, depending on the obligations that could be imposed. So the solution for this has been, many of you may have heard about this, is to we rolled out at CCO this Cert Connect. There was a soft rollout last summer. I think the big splash will be at Con Expo coming up, but this will be available to everybody. There was a webinar recently that maybe some of you heard about, but the solution is this. You can create a place. We've created a space where people can connect. This is not an eHarmony type of connect. It's a different kind, more like LinkedIn maybe. So you can connect employers and certificates, crane operators. And what happens is when the crane operator says, yeah, I want to do work for this employer, and I agree to connect, now that employer will get real-time updates. So if there's a revocation, there's an expiration, there's something that happens, you get reminders, you get a notice that something happened with the status of that certification. And there'll be a dashboard. I mean, there's all kinds of ways in real time, and we call it a smarter way to monitor those CCO certifications. So it's a great solution, and that case in Texas really highlights the need for this kind of solution. So it's you'll see more about this. I'm sure you've seen some already, but this is integrated into the MyCCO portal, and it's just going to allow employers to have a much more efficient tool to connect with those candidates and certificates and to check those certifications and get updates and reports in real time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rico on this same topic and turn the slides over to him.
Okay, thank you, John, for the information you shared. It was well presented and extremely informative. People can be very creative. And thank you, TJ, for inviting me here today. Hello, everybody. My name is Rico Gracia. My last name is Gracia. I know it gets mixed up a lot with Garcia, but it actually means grace in Spanish. It's certainly an honor to be here to share some insight from a company perspective and from an industry perspective. I do work for LYB, as you can see. LYB is a global chemical company located in 32 countries. We have 94 manufacturing sites, and approximately 31 are located here in the US. About 75% of my time is focused on crane and rigging training and development for our US sites, but I do support our global sites as well. Also, to support my position, I'm a CCO Proctor and Auditor. And of course, prior to working for LYB, I worked for many contractors, commercial and industrial throughout the US, Middle East, and South America. Now, I speak to you today, not specifically from LYB, but from an industry perspective. I'm confident that LYB requirements are in alignment with the rest of the petrochemical industry, and these requirements not only apply to our employees, but also to contractors that work on our sites. In addition, these may be more stringent than OSHA, which we know is the minimum requirements. As you can see, the first bullet says that riggers must be certified through national accredited agencies such as CCO, which meets these requirements. Now, we do honor other certifications as long as they meet these requirements that are nationally accredited. And depending on the type of rigging you do, is the level of certification required. Now, we all know, as John mentioned, that OSHA refers to the term qualified rigger, and I'll address that in a moment. But as LYB hires new employees and acquired companies, part of my role is to get them in compliance with our corporate crane and rigging policy and to get them certified as a rigger before they're permitted to do any rigging. And I normally get some pushback, saying, I've been doing this for 20 years. I've never had to be certified. But I assure you, after they receive the training and spend the time doing different scenarios to achieve that certification, the reward is immense. Training and certification have made huge developments and impacted our industry in a great way. It has happened more than once when I return to a site that someone waves me down and says, hey, Mr. Rico, just to let you know, after we took the training, we got certified, we found a better and safer way to move this piece of equipment. Now, that's not because I went out there and showed them how to rig it up. It's because they used the knowledge and skill they received from the training, and they came up with a solution to lift and move heavier loads in a safer and more efficient way. That testimony is more than money. I myself was a rigger for many years before I received any formal training and received any rigging certs. I was shocked when I realized some of the sketchy things I had been doing. But by the way, I was taught by someone who showed me how to do that, who learned from someone else who showed him how to do that. That tribal knowledge can be extremely dangerous. Okay, we've heard the saying, practice makes perfect, but I challenge you, if you take a baseball bat and you try to hit a golf ball through the golf course, you're not going to do very well. You can practice as much as you want. You need to use the right tool for the right job and be certified appropriately and have the knowledge and skill necessary for the task you're working on. Now, as a company, I would like you to imagine if you did accept contractors with an in-house qualification program. Okay, the issues that may be presented, we as a company would have to, or you as a company would have to assess their program to make sure it meets your needs. And honestly, it's not something that I or we or that you might want to invest your time in critiquing and evaluating their qualification programs, especially, and I say especially, when we know that we have national certifications that meet the highest standards and requirements through ANSI, ANAB, and NCCA. Okay, they've already done the work for us. So we want to respect those certifications. The next bullet requirements is requirements for crane operators, and they must be nationally certified and qualified, which I'll expand on shortly. I do want to tell you that LYB, we use a LMS system to track our employees' training and certifications, which sends out notifications accordingly. And of course, as mentioned, CCO is now introducing the CCO Cert Connect, which is rolling out soon. And I hope that you'll look at that platform. It's going to be very useful as well. And although for all of you CCO certification holders attending, you both and I both know that they'll send you out notifications when it's time for you to recertify. Now, I do want you to notice the information that NCCCO Foundation provides for us to be able to view who has actual accredited programs. That is an extremely valuable page. Thank you, NCCCO Foundation, for the legwork here. That really shows you who has the accreditations for what. So that's very, very appreciative. Next slide, please. Next slide. Prior to any of our employees are attending or attempting to achieve a national certification for a mobile crane, they must complete a mobile crane pre-certification training program with a qualified crane operator. Okay, this is in alliance and in alignment with OSHA as far as having a qualified, evaluated qualified person, training you during training. They go through each of these items, and we want to assure you that our employees have the best opportunity to achieve that certification and that they have a solid understanding of crane and rigging activities. Now, this is just a guidance document that we use. It's not mandatory for all companies to be using this by any means. However, it does assure us that we're giving our employees a great foundation before they even attempt to become a mobile crane operator. In addition, they must meet the physical requirements, including drug screening and eyesight requirements, depth perception, all the items required by ASME and our industry standards. LYB is very fortunate that we have a subscription to the ASME standards so that all of our employees have access to the latest and greatest B30 standards, and they can review them as needed. It's great to have that access. Of course, we can't print them, but we can view them. Okay, the next slide, please. As we look at this next slide, achieving the correct mobile crane certification, OSHA has mandated, and as it was mentioned through an evaluation, it is the employer who must ensure that each operator is qualified by demonstration. It goes into more detail. Now, LYB and most companies in the petrochemical industry um, qualify employees on each crane that they intend to operate. And of course, the configuration the crane will be used, and all this has to be documented. As we all know, if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And believe me, this is a good thing. As all of you know, there are many types of cranes and many variations, just like a vehicle. I do hold a driver's license, but I can hop into a rental car and not even know how to start it. Okay, this is the same applies to mobile cranes. We want to assure our employees and contractors on our sites and projects are familiar and qualified with the equipment they are operating. It says this expectation is required of anybody performing crane and rigging activities. If you don't have these certifications, qualifications, you will not be doing any work on our sites. And that is pretty much an industry standard. Now, all of our employees and contractors are orientated to our site-specific procedures. We verify their credentials and their qualifications prior to allowing them to start work. It is the company's responsibility. Let me say that again. It is the company's responsibility to verify this. Trust but verify, okay? This is the beauty of that QR code that CCO installed on their cards. Now, at first, not gonna lie to you, I was not a big fan of it. Now we have to scan these cards. Well, before there was an expiration date, and if someone had their certs maybe revoked and didn't turn in their card, as I'm guessing they probably don't do, and they come to your work site, you wouldn't know it unless you verified it. Now that QR code, it kind of forces you to do that. Okay, you scan it, and if the certification is not there, then guess what? They do not have it. So all these are key items to the safety of personnel and projects. And I'm going to go ahead and pass this back over to Mr. Zarian.
Thank you, Rico. I love the perspective that Rico brings, the real world perspective. It's just so different from my own experience. I always love hearing that, that other perspective. I've been in the seat of a crane once, just for a couple of minutes. It was terrifying for me and probably for anyone nearby, but I was closely supervised and no harm came to anyone. But gave me an appreciation for just how demanding, some of what happens, and it really is. So, but anyway, thank you for that perspective, Rico. Well done. This second part of our presentation, we're going to turn to the issue of reporting safety incidents. So, we've done our job. We checked. We verified. We made sure folks had the right training and credentials and qualifications. And now something's happened. So what do? We threw in substance abuse because often we find safety incidents and substance abuse are closely related or associated. So we've put a little bit of that in as well. So let me start with what incident reporting requirements are. This will be familiar to many of you, but under 29 CFR 1904.39, there are requirements for employers to notify OSHA when, of course, an employee is killed, but also suffers a work-related hospitalization, amputation, or loss of an eye. So those are strict and clear requirements. People ask us, what are CCO's reporting requirements for, if there's an incident, a safety incident in particular? And so we have requirements on the certificant. So they must actually self-report, for example, if they fail to meet their certification requirements. That's the closest maybe we get. They must cooperate with any investigations, right? So when we ask them about an incident, maybe involving them or someone else on their site, they need to cooperate. But the requirements we have are on the certificate. That's who we deal with. There's no requirement of the employer. So the dotted line, or there's no direct line between a CCO and the employer. But there certainly are best practices, and I want to talk about those a little bit here in terms of the employers and what an important role they play. Now, our code of ethics, which applies to certificates, clearly has obligations with respect to safety. So it provides, among other things, that in their occupation, certificates must place safety and welfare of others above all other considerations, and must make appropriate personnel aware of safety concerns, and must not violate safety-related rules. And also, of course, they need to cooperate when there's an incident. So we have very specific requirements in our code of ethics that serve to focus certificants' attention on safety. Now, again, sometimes that doesn't happen for whatever reason. I want to show you a video just because it's quite remarkable. First of all, this gentleman here is holding up a cell phone. You'll see in a second, probably taking pictures or video. I totally empathize with that guy. When I travel now, it drives my wife nuts. I take pictures of cranes. If there's a bunch of cranes, it's even better. I get, I'll take video. I mean, even abroad, that's even more exciting. She thinks I'm nuts for doing that, but so I get the impulse there. But you'll see what happens here. This is a case where someone actually took a crane home and then allowed his nephew to operate it. So I think the operator must be this individual, if I remember right, but allowed his nephew, who was a teenager, to operate it. And you can see what happens here. It came very close to being a terrible incident. There's no audio here, but you'll see it. Remarkable. So, I mean, this was this gentleman's, luckiest day. Um, uh, when we were preparing for this presentation, Rico also pointed out that whoever owns this car got a new car. I don't know if that counts for luck or not, but my goodness, that could have been a horrible outcome. Nobody was actually hurt, but you saw how close that came to being a very, very, very serious injury or worse. This was reported by the employer, who obviously, had information about it, and ultimately this led to a revocation of the certificate by the Ethics and Discipline. There was some substance abuse perhaps involved, as I recall, and that person will now have to serve some time outside of the program as a consequence of this event. Um, Let me go to another. This is from a little over a year ago. This case involved another employer report to us. That's how we get information about many of these. This one involved a hydraulic mobile crane. They extended only the rear outriggers and then tried to rotate the boom cab. Crane toppled over. The boom structure and the jib came to rest against the staging tower, causing very serious damage. This too was reported by the employer, and this also led to a revocation by the Ethics and Discipline Committee. Um, a more recent one, this one was a client actually was lifted for tree removal without a safety harness. And this was during a storm. You can't quite see it in the photographs, but there was lightning reported within 1 mile of the location at the time. And this was reported by someone to us. So an operator was involved. We interviewed that operator and the employer. They described it as just love the term, a brain aneurysm. But they had taken corrective measures. They consulted an arborist. They adopted new protocols. They added supervision. And I believe this may have ended up in a warning, if I recall. I don't think it resulted in a revocation, but fortunately there was no harm that came of it. And certainly both the operator and the employer immediately took steps to try to correct what they had not done correctly. And this, as I say, was reported by an employer, or actually in that case by a third party. Not the employer to CCO. So we do get these reports, and the Ethics and Discipline Committee does act on them. As I mentioned at the outset, often there's substance abuse involved, and so we do have a substance abuse policy that is enforced. This also by the Ethics and Discipline Committee, and this all the challenges. I'm old enough to remember the war on drugs, and then there was no war. We made peace with drugs apparently. Now maybe we're going back to some struggle. I don't know. It goes back and forth, right? But people will often confuse the legality of something. Hey, marijuana is legal in my state. Well, that's not the same. Alcohol is legal too, at least for adults, and yet we can't get drunk or high and then go operate equipment like a crane. And so there's a very specific policy that relates when certificates are under the influence of a substance that impairs them or could be expected to impair them. And so that is enforced by the Ethics and Discipline Committee. Now, we know there's incidents where we don't get reports because they come to us in other ways. So we found out through a subpoena where there's litigation. We'll get a subpoena and say, hey, was this guy certified? For how long? What score did he get on his test? I mean, can we see your test? And so we don't respond to everything they ask for, but we will say, whether they're certified because that's part of the litigation. But we found out about one here. This was last year, where there was a complaint alleging negligence, also substance abuse, and that the employer knew about this all along. But we'd never heard a report about the incident that was the issue of in that case. So, it's hard for us to substantiate even when we get a report, without the employer's participation and cooperation. Because we do get reports not just from employers, but from third parties. And we have to be careful here. I mean, if I can be candid, we've gotten reports from ex-spouses, people who have maybe reason to maybe not feel very good about the certificate and make a report, right? That happens sometimes, but some of those have merit, and we do investigate them when we can. Here was an email back in October 24. An employer reported a failed pre-employment drug test. That one actually came from the employer, sorry. And it was, gave us the documentation. We acted on that. So we do get reports from employers on the substance, but we do get reports, as I mentioned, from others. There was a hotline that we've established. A coworker said, "Hey, this guy failed his drug test, and got taken off a project." But we couldn't get any documentation. No one would release any information. It was hard to follow up, even though we repeatedly reached out to the employer. A wife reported a husband. This case was not open. Again, we didn't have any documentation. It's very tough in these cases. My favorite, I think, is this phone report that we got. One of them. It's a brother-in-law had a fraudulent card, documented drug use, and the investigation showed the report was actually made by the boyfriend of an estranged wife, and the drug test report was a forgery. So, so you never know. In these cases, this was a totally bogus report. So we really try to drill down, and if we don't have the documentation, we won't pursue it. And if we have some documentation, we'll make sure it's accurate as well. That's really important. This is, I think, the point at which I'll turn it over back to you, Rico, for some thoughts on these topics.
Yeah, that that shows me that there's creativity on both ends, forging and also, forging against people. So I want to talk about crane and rigging incidents. On July 18, 2008, one of the nation's largest cranes fell over backwards, 4 fatalities. And that happened on the LYB Lyondell-Bazell site. You can find that footage on YouTube. Also, you see the picture of Big Blue that fell over at the Brewer Stadium. These are huge accidents causing fatalities. And I'm going to tell you that crane and rigging is life critical. It does not have to be a huge crane falling over to cause a fatality or injury or damage equipment. I'm going to challenge you to start with what we can control. Okay, develop rigging plans to prepare correctly. Conduct random audits. This is something that we do on our sites, is that randomly we'll pull up and say, hey, let's check your paperwork, let's check your certifications, let's scan that QR code, let's make sure everybody's on the uppity up. And that's a good thing, okay? This has happened to me when I was in the seat of a crane many a times. And you know what? That's perfectly fine, because as long as your ducks are in a row, you're going to do just fine. Now, LYB does have a notification system to alert near misses and incidents that take place on our sites. And I'm going to tell you, when I was a young gun, the safety officer said that in one of our safety meetings, you need to report all near misses. And I thought that was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard. To rig up on a load and it almost fall over, but it doesn't. Now, why in the world am I going to tell on myself? It didn't make any sense to me at all, until one day I rigged up on a piece, lifted it, and it rolled and nearly smashed my partner. I was stunned. And if you're like me, I'd rather hurt myself than someone else. And although it didn't hurt him, it came way too close. It scared me so much, I nearly had to go to the porta can and clean myself. I mean, it was horrible. And later that day, I was in the smoke pen with the rigger when smoking was cool. And I told him, what happened? I said, and he said, wow. He said, that same thing almost happened to me, lifting that same piece the same way. And I promise you, I nearly knocked his teeth right out of his head. You mean the same thing happened to you and you didn't tell anybody? And suddenly that light illuminated above my head, like in the cartoons. That's why you report near misses. Because if you had the thought to lift it that way, then likely someone else will try to lift it that same way and may not get out of the way in time. Okay, we went to report all near misses. So we want to investigate all incidents, near misses, so that we can mitigate, eliminate hazards, and improve safety throughout our sites and throughout our industry. LYB has many employees that have been trained on how to investigate these incidents and assign a team to come up with the root cause so that we can avoid the same incident. If you can go to the next slide, please. Now, this is called reporting incidents or discrepancies to CCO or the appropriate certification organization. It may be necessary. Now, here's the deal. A lot of us don't want to feel like we're going to tell on somebody. But if you have somebody on your project that was completely negligent or hungover, drunk, doped up, or just completely unqualified to the point that you had to stop him from operating the equipment, run him off your project, and maybe you just hope that you never see him again. But unfortunately, they may just go to another project and potentially hurt somebody else. And that actually happened, as John said earlier. I want you to digest this. You are only reporting what happened. It is up to CCO and their procedures to mitigate this, to do their due diligence to find a solution. Whether it's revoking or suspending their certs or maybe find another solution, you did your part just reporting it. Okay. And I want you to consider whether you would feel comfortable having a family member work near a crane operator whose certification was revoked or who was never properly certified and qualified in the first place, or run off from another project for being negligent and never had any consequences because someone didn't call and report it. We share a responsibility to ourselves and to others to ensure all certifications are verified. Again, I cannot tell you enough. It is our responsibility to be checking these things, to be verifying this, to be conducting audits, to making sure that everybody is properly certified, qualified for the task they're working on. And as you remember, I'll leave you with this, safety state of mind. Safety is a state of mind, and accidents are an absence of mind. Okay. And I want to thank you for giving me the privilege to speak today. Thank you for your time and attention. And I do hope that I get to see you all at Con Expo. So you can go to the next slide for the Q&A.
And yeah, we'll turn it back over to you, TJ. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Well, thanks to both of you. I appreciate that. So we do have time for some Q&A. John and Rico provided some awesome information. So I thanks to both of you for doing that. But I do want to, leave a little time for Q&A. If you have any questions, please use there's a Q&A box you'll see along the kind of the stripe there for Zoom. You can submit your question in there, and I will read those out to the speakers, and they can answer your questions. So please submit your questions, and I'll get to many as I can. So one thing is, John, you talked about kind of the consequences. You talked a little bit about some of the consequences if people don't do certification, right? You showed that video, and whether the employers are doing it or not. I wonder if you got any other, examples or of what are for both the employer, I guess, and the employee, like, what could be the potential consequences for them? I mean, I assume there's a business consequence as well that some of these businesses have faced, when there's been an incident, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, and if you're asking specifically about the failure to verify certification, I mean, from the legal standpoint, putting the lawyer hat on, that I mean, if I'm a plaintiff's lawyer, that's a very useful fact. Needless to say, I mean, it just, what you're going to look at is negligent hiring, negligent conduct by the employer. You're trying to fault the employer, not just the operator. And if you're looking for conduct by the employer, you look at what they did to fail to evaluate them or qualify them or train them. And just the failure to check certification alone, that's a really easy one for the plaintiff's lawyer to seize on. So, that's why it's such a big deal to make sure that those, and Rico mentioned that they have an LMS. A lot of companies have their own processes, but the challenge becomes, how do we do this in real time? When things could be changing day to day, week to week, month to month, it becomes, and you have, like Rico's company, it has a lot of operators. It becomes a real challenge to manage all of that. But yeah, the consequences of when an accident happens, especially, that's when it really the rubber meets the road. Is you've got to have that stuff buttoned down well in advance, or there are legally there's real exposure there.
No, thanks. And from your perspective, Rico, talked a little bit about LYB and the major accident that happened in 2008. Not specifically to that, I guess, but just clearly a lot of things went into place. I'm sure you had some before that, LYB did, and I'm sure there's some. It sounds like a whole bunch went in after that in terms of requirements and procedures and the LMS and things like that. again, kind of from a business perspective, it sounds like safety is a major factor for that kind of thing. But I assume there's a business case to be made for putting all of these things into place too, in terms of long term, putting money towards safety and preventative measures is probably at least as equal to putting it in the after at the if something happens afterwards.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question, and I'll tell you this that throughout my career, in crane and rigging, technology and training and all has advanced so much, But when we have an incident like that was a horrible incident. I hate that that even happened, and that happened prior to me coming to the company. But I will tell you that that holds a lot of weight throughout the industry, period. And of course, those the people that were in that crane were not survivors. But other than that, when we have an incident that is complete negligent, number one, if it's dependent on if it's our employee or if it's a contract employee. If it's a contract employee and we do our due diligence of reporting as much as we can to what we can do, we have a team that analyzes that and decides, well, if it's an OSHA recordable or what avenue we need to take. We may or may not have a do not let them back into our site list, whether they get their certifications back or not. Okay, so we want to make sure that we do the best to keep our sites and not just us, not just I don't want it to seem so selfish that we don't want an individual going anywhere that had an incident on our site and go somewhere else and cause an incident over there. I mean, it's horrible to be able to consume that and to be able to just sleep on that, knowing that you let someone out the gate without reporting them is not going to be, it's not going to give you a good night's rest. I promise you that. It's going to be hard to comprehend that they have done some damage to someone else. So we have a lot of checkpoints in place, and that's why we have a lot of audits going on throughout our sites to make sure that everybody's doing the right thing. We make sure that we are assisting to and coaching, number one, that we want to coach people to do the right thing. And if they can't do the right thing, then we don't need them on our site, and we don't want them, to be anywhere doing anything crane and rigging related that could hurt somebody. It's a dangerous industry. I mean, we're not, baking cookies. Not that baking cookies can't be dangerous. I mean, you can certainly get burned, but I'm telling you, we have a lot of live lines out there with a lot of dangerous stuff going through those pipes, and we don't want anything to get damaged to hurt, us or the community around us.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, like a lot of life or death situations, really. I mean,
sure.
that you're
Sure.
in, for
I
sure.
do have one other thing to offer. I think that crane and rigging, as in general, is overlooked for the significance that it has. People, it looks when things are done right, it looks beautiful, it looks easy, and to the untrained eye, it's simple. And I will tell you that we can have a new employee that we pull off right off the street. It doesn't matter what his craft was prior to, if he was maybe straight out of high school, for God's sake, and he puts his hands and you ask him, hey, you go mind going to wrapping the, sling around that pipe and hook it up to that crane, and they will have no problem doing that. Do you hear me? They'll do it. Now, if you ask that same employee, hey, how about pulling up that breaker box that's moving these wires around? They're going to say no. That could hurt me. That could kill me. But I'm going to tell you, it's the same significance. Crane and rigging is life critical. You can have the same outcome. It's very dangerous. You cannot sweep a crane and rigging incident under the rug. Okay. You can't, it's not like you cut the pipe too short and you can go get another piece of pipe. When a crane goes over, everybody knows that people are hurt. Okay. Things happen. So it's often overlooked as
Yeah.
the significance that it has.
Well, yeah, well said, Rick. I totally agree. I'm sure John does too. There is a question here. Does a driver's license revocation from a DWI conviction affect a CCO certification?
We it's funny. We've just actually this has come up in the last year, and so I'm aware that our testing services has actually put in policies in place that it would, and it depends on the certification, right? It's the kind of certification that you would expect that there's a moving vehicle, a moving piece of equipment. Would it affect your rigging certification or rigger or signal person, something like that? It would not. So there's a differentiation made, but we have started to factor that in, and it would impact those other types of certifications.
Gotcha. Thank you. There's a question here I can actually answer, which they're asking if this webinar is going to be posted on the website and then if they can share it. Most definitely, this should be posted up probably by the end of this week, if not the beginning of next week. It'll be on the foundation website, so NCCCOFoundation.org. And you can see it under the webinars there, and you'll be able to access this webinar as well as all of our previous ones. Again, a lot of covering safety, other safety topics that you might be interested in. We would welcome you sharing it with as many people as possible that we can get this information out to. It's free. It's supposed to be out there for everybody. We just want to share it and help make the industry safer. So appreciate you asking that question. Another thing for you, Rico, is so, what would you say, what are the key factors that LYB is, related to LYB success, and getting everybody on board with doing the extensive verification reporting, right? You said you guys, may go a little bit above and beyond in some cases, and even for rigging and requiring certification and things, and that people eventually, see value in it right after they do it. I guess curious if there's anything you think, one or two factors in terms of like really helping, helping the employees getting on board with that. Outside of it being, you have to do it. I'm sure there's, thought processes in terms of trying to get people really committed to doing verification and reporting like they should.
Well, thank you for the question. I'll tell you this, that LYB has a goal zero initiative to have zero accidents, zero incidents, zero emissions. And we have some great global crane and rigging SMEs that have written a very stringent crane and rigging policy that we need to adhere to. And this is for the betterment of everybody involved. And I think that once people get used to our culture on our sites and within the industry period, once they get used to, yeah, you're going to have to write a lift plan for every lift. Yep, for every lift. And once they get used to that culture and understanding why we're doing that, because we want everybody to look at it. We want everybody involved. We want everybody to have some input on the lift, the travel path, and the lift and load placement of that. It really, I think that they take it with them. I think they take it home. They don't just use it at work, but they take that idea to their home life, and it allows them to see that, hey, you know what? This is not just, mandated by the company. This should be a lifestyle that we're living in order to work in a safer culture. I mean, that's the reality of it all, is that not just safe at work, but safe at home. We take that once you're used to working in that culture, it just goes with you wherever you go, and hopefully it rubs off on other people too.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great point. Yeah, and you're really instilling that safety culture both, at work and at home, and hopefully that's leading to, to just a safer environment for everybody. So that's awesome. And kind of for John and for Rico, I guess because I'm sure you've seen a lot of different cases and incidents and things that have happened. But assuming there's a small company watching this that's, they don't have all the resources that maybe, an LYB has, or they're just trying to, saying they're new to this company and they say, we need to start doing this stuff. Any suggestions on where to start, right? You always, it's little steps here and there, baby steps that get you to the bigger things and having a full program. But any thoughts about, what would be the essential things or the places for a company to start if they want to start making sure they're doing this better?
You want to take that first, Rico, or?
You can go ahead and start on that one.
Okay, yeah. Well, my only thought is, I mean, I do think, it really comes down to a process. I mean, whether it's I mean, by analogy, I've had my own small law firms. I've worked at very large law firms, but ultimately, you got to have a process, and so I think the same is true here. So having a process, a protocol, there are tools out there. I mean, Cert Connect is a good example. I mean, increasingly we have tools available. The VCO when that came out, but then having a procedure to follow, I think, is the key, no matter what the size, and just stick to it and just be consistent. I think that would be my recommendation.
That's good information. I like that. I would go ahead and say this. Number one, if you're a small company and you're getting started in this industry, I'm going to say that you really need to invest in your employees. Really need to invest in their training, because that safety record is going to get you places. It may cost a little bit money up front, but I can promise you the return will be well worth it. There's a lot of great resources out there. You have the NCCCO Foundation. You have websites that you can look at. There's a lot of great crane and rigging training companies out there that meet the CCO standards and that train to those standards. So I would say, to use your resources to find those, just like you shop for anything else, check the feedback on it, make sure that they're a legitimate company. I've seen companies who have spent a lot of money at some of these smaller training companies and come out with a little card that doesn't mean a whole lot. So make sure that you're getting the best quality certifications that you can get. And CCO is, if not, is my top choice. I mean, there's other ones out there, but make sure that you're doing, the minimum according to what OSHA and the ASME standards say. Research that, I would say.
Thank you. And John, you mentioned the Cert Connect thing again. Is that something that employers, is it something that costs employers to be able to utilize, do you know, or is it a free service, I think?
I don't believe there's any cost at all associated with it. And again, there's a webinar that was recently. Was it last week? And I don't know if TJ you were there or I wasn't. But there's webinar that may be available even now out there. But I'm not aware of any charge for that.
Okay, yeah, I had not I don't think I know of any either. So oh, and one final question here. So I just came in, which is in terms of rigor certifications, Rico referred to LYB requiring a certification from a nationally accredited agency. Do these agencies use a nationally standardized curriculum slash outline, or does the agency create the curriculum and therefore may need vetting for suitability? And then the last question is, does NCCCO offer Canadian training? Which John might be able to speak to that. But in terms of as you understand kind of the accreditation and the agencies, Rico, I think the question there is, are they coming up with their own standard curriculum and outline, or does the agency have their own that needs to be vetted, or by being an accredited organization, then that's providing legitimacy, I guess.
Yeah, so one of the great resources that we showed earlier was that NCCCO Foundation page that shows who is accredited according to ANSI and ANAB and NCCA. Those are accredited organizations that meet the standards of the industry of I would fair to say, the U.S. I'm not sure if it goes further than the U.S., but um, we don't want to be going through someone else's qualification program to vet it out to see if they meet the requirements. We want them to meet our requirements, okay? And our requirements are that you're going to meet the um, national certification programs. And now there are other programs that meet that, and you can see on that on the NCCCO Foundation page that there are certainly locals and carpenters unions and things of that nature that meet those requirements in addition. So just go with someone that already has been vetted. That's what we want to use. We don't want to go through and turn over pages and go through and go through your site, your company, qualification program. We want you to meet the national standard. That makes it a lot easier on us.
It,
Yeah,
good
I
point.
appreciate Rico's comments. I might add there are certification bodies, right? We're an example of a certification body. There's a few others that are like CCO, nationally accredited, and that's what's required. And so you want to make sure that ultimately, if you're pursuing a certification, that's what you're getting and not something else. But the training will generally come from another source. So it's a training provider, and Rico spoke to this, but you just want to make sure you get a good training provider who's preparing your personnel to take the exams and doing a good job of that, providing good training to help them, be qualified and learn the skills and abilities they need and the knowledge they need, but so they can pass those assessments. But the training will typically come from another body, not from the certification body. And we don't offer training to the candidates that way. To answer the last part of that question, we do have a number of Canadian certificates. We have not yet developed a certification to the Z standard. That may be, sort of off in the distance, perhaps, but and someday. But I think that's the standard in Canada. But we do know that there are Canadian, operators who hold our certifications.
Th- Thanks to both of you. Well, I see it's we're up on our time, so I want to respect everybody's time. But before I sign off, I just want to ask everybody to keep an eye out for our future webinars. They're going to be posted on our NCCCO Foundation webpage. We are planning, for instance, next month a webinar on kind of a new report and tools we have developed to assist the industry in outreach and recruitment efforts. So not on safety, but really focused on trying to help recruit more people, quality people for the industry to help improve safety in the long term. If you want to watch any of our previous webinars, you can find them on our website, again, ncccofoundation.org. A recording of this webinar will be available next week or so. And I will also be sending a brief survey out to all attendees briefly after this webinar concludes. I ask that you complete it so we can get your feedback. We always are looking to improve the webinar series. Thanks again to John and Rico, and thanks to everyone for joining the NCCCO Foundation webinar today. We appreciate you signing in, and I hope you learned a lot. So thank you very much, gentlemen, and everybody else have a great rest of the day. Take care.